Kate, owner of 123, a business dedicated to supporting leaders who want to be their best selves every day. Leading is hard work, but the chairs here at 123 are comfy. So please have a seat and join the conversation. Welcome back to the Comfy Chairs. I had the privilege of hosting a conversation about Susan Cain's latest book, Bittersweet, with Michelle. Michelle and I have worked together off and on for the last 15 years. And during that time, she has been a coworker, mentor, consultant, and trusted confidant. So it's no surprise that we had a very long conversation about this book and our own experiences with bittersweetness. It was pretty wonderful. This does mean, though, that rather than publishing a single episode, I've split this particular topic into multiple, shorter installments. You can look for the remaining episodes over the next 2 weeks. Think of these as bite-sized, bittersweet conversations. So I think the first question I would have for you is, how do you want to be introduced?
How do I want to be introduced? I mean, you can introduce me as your longtime friend, your, I don't know. We have kind of a history, so
we do have. We have a history I'm very grateful for.
Same.
Yeah. I think what I would want to highlight about how I know you is, yes, we've worked together, and I've been fortunate to be able to count you as a friend, but you're somebody from whom I'm always learning. You have a really deep expertise in helping people understand how they react to difficult situations. You've given me that guidance, and I've seen you guide and coach other people. I think you're also an expert who doesn't take herself too seriously. Like, you take the work seriously, but not you, and it means that you're a lot of fun to work with.
Oh yeah, thanks.
Too.
That means a lot to me, because that actually that rings with who I want to be. Thanks.
No, you are more than welcome. And that's one of the reasons I think, when I started reading this book and was like, this is something I have to talk about, I thought of you, because one of the things I feel you and I have had the privilege of kind of exploring together through our time working together, the training that we've participated in, is that, am I aware of how I come across?
Mm-hmm.
Am I showing up the way I want to? And am I compassionate about what people are going through in the world around us?
Right. Yeah, the training we've been through, the training we've delivered.
Exactly.
The training we've participated in, all of that, yes. And those are questions that we've asked ourselves, asked each other, asked about other leaders.
Yeah. Feedback we've given each other.
Mm-hmm.
I can think about, you've helped me see the times that I haven't been my best self.
Same. I would say the same about you. You've helped me to see, even in watching your model of being someone who's conscientious about the work product that they're putting out in the world. And yeah, I think we, in our work together, when we did work together, we really complemented each other.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And I've been poorly introducing, but just talking to my friend and long-term colleague, Michelle, who has, 25 years of experience on the administrative side of healthcare rather than the clinical, and is currently working as an independent consultant with a system here in the States. And we have kind of done a book club with each other, if you will, having read, and we're here to discuss Bittersweet by Susan Cain, her latest publication.
Yes.
Which is magnificent. And now it's a good chance for us to talk about it. For you, what were the big takeaways?
There's the quiz. Did you take the quiz?
I did.
Okay. So I also took the quiz, and I would not have described myself as an adult person or even as a young person. I would not describe myself as melancholic, but clearly I was wrong, because the very first question is, do you tend to tear up, or, do you tend to cry at touching commercials? And I have been crying about Peter coming home at Christmas.
Oh, right.
Since I was in 6th grade. I'm like, Peter comes home and makes the coffee. It's Christmas time. Here it is, Peter, you're home. And
Folgers and Hallmark.
Folgers.
Every time.
Every time.
Oh.
Every time.
Yeah.
I cry every year when Peter gets home at Christmas. So, and all the Super Bowl commercials that are really touching, and they get to me. So the first question I was like, yeah, I'm screwed. I mean, clearly, right? And it just went down from there.
Just for my own curiosity,
mm-hmm.
What was your score?
It was 7.8. What was yours?
8.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and I was really surprised, and I was very honest because I'm not touched by old photographs. I was like a 5 on that one because I'm not really especially, I mean, when I see old photographs like in a museum or something, I think, oh, I wonder what it was like to be those people, at that time, and what were they going through. But I'm not especially moved, like emotionally by them. I'm just kind of curious. I would say I'm curious, not moved. But some of the other questions, I don't remember all the questions. I just remember that first one.
Are you moved to goosebumps several times a day?
See, no, I wouldn't.
That one I was like, no, 2.
No, not so much. Yeah, like I was like a 3 on that one. But there were several others that I was a 10.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what the author C.S. Lewis meant when he described joy as a sharp, wonderful stab of
100%, yes.
Yeah, 10.
Yeah, 10, absolutely.
10
100%.
out of 10. So it'd probably be good for me to define terms a little bit. You mentioned melancholy. We've talked about the word poignant. Mm-hmm. But specifically, Bittersweet, name of the book, central concept, is defined as a tendency to states of longing, poignancy, and sorrow, an acute awareness of passing time, and a curiously piercing joy at the beauty of the world.
And it's interesting to consider because I have 3 children. I've never been a person that is like, oh my gosh, they're going to kindergarten. It's so terrible. Like, stop growing up, because I wanted them to become cool adult people in the world, and they have. So I'm not a sentimental person, but I do have a longing for other, not necessarily the past, but a longing for better, more, different.
I think it's this awareness that even if things are moving exactly as planned, right? Like your children are growing, like they're growing, they're getting bigger. Great, you're doing your job as a parent.
Yep,
you're doing an exceptionally good job as a parent if they end up as cool people in the world.
Yep,
there can still be this sense of, we're never going to have this moment at the park again, and that's fine,
right?
But it's gone.
Yes.
The big concepts in the book are around sorrow, loss, and impermanence, and how those are just one side of our equations.
Right. I was particularly, I don't know if interested, I was particularly conscious of the conversation around the movie Inside Out. So she has that whole conversation in the book about the movie Inside Out, and that the original story had fear as the counterpart to joy as opposed to sadness, which I didn't know any of that previous to reading this book because I saw the movie in its final production. And the sentence that got me the most was when she said that the writer of the movie realized that fear had nothing to teach joy.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, because fear is still a character, but not the central character the way that sadness is. It was sadness that taught joy about compassion and connection and loss and longing and impermanence.
Yeah.
And the freedom to understand impermanence.
Same for me. That fear had nothing to teach her. Whoa.
Right.
And how in some ways I felt kind of like nailed to the spot on that, because I know personally I let fear rule a lot of things in my life, whether it's anxiety as opposed to terror, but fear is kind of a constant companion. And to realize, because I really think that what they discovered making that movie is true, we don't learn from fear. It can keep us safe,
right?
But that's not learning.
Right.
In fact, the ultimate goal of safety is to have no change happen to you, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
And we don't go through life that way.
Right.
But what can teach us are the things that make us feel longing. It's been an interesting way to kind of, wake up and think differently.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I remember the most about that movie, that I remember reflecting on at the end of the movie, was it's not that sadness became joy. Sadness was still sadness, exactly the same. The blue character that she was, kind of the Eeyore mentality.
Yep.
But joy made peace with her. Joy made peace with sadness. And I think that's one of the like lessons of the book, is that we have to make peace with our sadness.
Yeah. I was always really struck in that movie that, Joy didn't want anything to do with sadness. She thought she was, the wet blanket on the party.
Exactly. Like, just leave us alone. Like, come on.
And when there was that moment where the emotions could be blended, where sadness and joy could be with each other, that made everyone's life richer. It's not about, well, I'm going to handle you and put you away because it makes me feel bad. Instead, it's how much richer our inner and outer lives are when we have a whole palette of emotions available to us. That big moment where joy recognizes that sadness brings other people to you.
Right.
When there's sadness, people come there to care for you. And without that, we don't have those connections.
And I think when all of our emotions have their place is really kind of self-actualization, right? When all of those emotions have their place, that's when we reach that point. And we're not trying to fight with them. Cain's book, I think, really talks about this idea of, positive, everything has to be positive all the time. And the struggle of that, of like, then I have to fight with my fear, my anxiety, my disgust, my sadness, my anger. I have to like, keep it at bay because nobody wants to see that in American culture, so to speak. So,
yeah. Well, that's the other Susan of this book, is Susan David.
Right.
Talking about emotional agility. And I don't remember whether it's Susan Cain, the author, if it's her term or if she's quoting Susan David, but that idea of the tyranny of positivity.
I think that was Susan David.
That was something I highlighted.
Right.
Because it does feel like you've got to put on a happy face. You've got to go smile. There's an episode of The Simpsons where Lisa's really struggling. She's feeling kind of sad.
Yeah.
And Marge doesn't know how to help her and tells her just to smile and drops her off at school and is watching her walk into school struggling to keep the smile on her face. And Marge realizes, no, this isn't what I want for my daughter.
Right.
And, like, squeals up
right.
and tells her, if you need to be sad, be sad.
Yeah.
If you need, if you're ready to be happy, be happy. I'll love you no matter what.
Right. Exactly. And I think I wish, we were raised in a generation that didn't tell us that. We were kind of, as some of the social media talk about, we're the last of the feral generation, right? And it's a suck it up, buttercup. I mean, that's
latchkey.
Yeah, exactly.
Figure it out. Exactly. And I think the one thing I would say about my young adult children is I've done better as they became adults than I did when they were younger, because as a parent, I was like, you're okay, you're fine, it's okay, you're okay. And I think I could have done a better job of helping them to manage those various emotions. Well, it's, don't be too hard on yourself, because, as a young parent,
right,
you haven't necessarily learned those lessons.
Correct. That's yes.
How can you teach your children something you don't know?
Right. I think if I, in my early 50s, if I was a parent now, I would do it differently. And I do hope that parents in this next generation are doing it differently, because I think there is a lot to be known about mental health and psychology and how to manage all of the emotions, as opposed to just being like, drive, get it done, be competitive, and, win. So,
yep. Smile like you mean it. Fake it till you make it.
Fake it. Yes.
Never let them see you sweat.
Never, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Those are wildly unhealthy.
Yeah. And so, interesting.
Yeah. I follow like a quote of the day posted on LinkedIn, and they had one that was all about how, it's not perfectionism. I set my mark at perfect, like beyond perfect, so that all of my results are then great. And it was fascinating watching the responses to that.
Interesting.
I did not see any comments that were like, totally agree. This is awesome. It was, wow, this is not okay.
Right. Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
You know, I'm working with a lot of younger people in the consulting world. There's a lot of young, new associates, as they're called. And so I get to kind of be this mentor. That's not what I'm getting paid for, but it's still just part of the role. And some of the other consultants that are my age will say things, behind their back, so to speak, but they'll say, kids these days, and they don't want to work like we did. And, they want to make sure they have their after 5 o'clock time. And I listened to this for a little bit, and I finally said to one of the gentlemen, I appreciate what you're saying, but I do want to kind of counterbalance the view a little bit for you, because when you look at our generation, most of us are overweight, we're sleep deprived, we have anxiety that's undiagnosed, we have type 2 diabetes, heart disease, many other things, liver problems. I don't know that we're doing it right. So I think that allowing the next generation to figure that out in a healthier way may be the best way to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also, how the memory always serves us, right?
Sure.
Like, you're always the victor, or, the hero, or the appropriate victim in your memories, because, okay, 50-year-old, 15 years ago, when you were 35, when or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
25 years ago, when you were new in your career, where you were establishing a family, a social life, you didn't have as many responsibilities at work.
Right.
You did prioritize some of those things that were outside of the office.
Yes.
And that change happened gradually. It didn't happen overnight. So now that you're in this place of, oh, kids these days,
right,
it's so easy to forget, oh, I was a kid.
Yes, exactly. You were a kid. You were prioritizing different things. And every generation has the moment where they say kids these days. I'm sure I've said something about this generation, right?
Well, it's funny. This is very timely, because the episode that's going to publish before this one, I'm talking with a young professional in his 30s about generational differences. And in some of the research I did for that, there are these quotes that are like, I just don't know what's wrong with the young people of this day. They don't respect their elders, and, they only focus on, pursuing pleasure and partying. And these are quotes that come from like 6,000 BC.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Even before there was like Gen X,
right,
or teeny boppers, or any sort of label.
For a generation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That it was like, oh, kids these days.
Yes.
Sheesh, they're awful.
So apparently there is nothing new under the sun, right? The kids these days ethos is apparently alive and well in every generation since the beginning of time.
And it's to tie it back to this, it's that sense of time is going really fast. What I have is not going to last. And for some people, there's a sweetness to looking at people who are younger and remembering, oh, I had that time where my body didn't hurt when I woke up in the morning.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't get sleep injuries.
Yeah. That I didn't have as many responsibilities. I wasn't trying to figure out what it was going to look like in retirement. And instead of cherishing that and celebrating it for those people that get to have that, their youth is wasted on the young. Some people are bitter about it.
Right. Right.
And, the fear part, I think, overtakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we were talking about, fear and anger, what came to mind for me was Maslow's hierarchy. Because you talked about self-actualization, which is the pinnacle, right? When we're dealing with the foundation of that pyramid, our physical safety, the basics, do I have shelter? Do I have food? Am I not going to die? Our emotions are kind of binary, and they are focused on things like fear. As we go up, we start getting closer to belonging.
Yeah.
Which carries in it a sense of longing.
Yes.
And being able to get to a place where we are actualized and our emotions are integrated and they're aligned with our actions, you have to move away from fear.
Right. And I think that it's interesting that you say that, because I haven't been frequently as an adult anyway in a position where I had to fear for my basic fundamental,
Right.
health, safety, etc. And so then where does fear come from for someone that's privileged and has all of their needs met either by themselves or by others, right? I haven't had that experience as an adult. And so where does that fear come from?
Stress.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, we could have our, non-clinical discussion about, cortisol overload and
Sure.
the amygdala hijack, but the modern world's really stressful.
It is. Yeah, it really is.
And it perpetuates itself.
I mean, islands are on fire. There's hurricanes in places of the country that there aren't supposed to be. And that's just the natural stuff coming from like the weather and the climate. That doesn't even include the politics and the guns and the, fill in the blank. So, yeah.
Well, one of the things I wanted us to spend some time talking about today, because that sorrow, loss, longing, one of the things that Cain talks about is grief.
Mm.
And the notes that I made for myself are around how it is entirely possible, and I think even natural, for us to grieve things we haven't had.
Mm.
And the last few years, there's been a lot of what if, I think, for a lot of people, with job loss or illness, and the things that many of us thought were right at hand for us never materialized.
Right.
So I think we're living with a lot of pandemic grief outside of the people got really sick and died.
Yeah.
That there's, where was the world headed 3 years ago?
Right.
That we're never going to get that back.
Right.
And how do we mend ourselves after that?
Yeah, I'm sure some of what you're thinking about too is the conversation that Susan Cain has about her mother and grieving the loss of the relationship with her mother, but her mother's still alive. So how do you grieve? How do you grieve the loss of someone that's still here? How do you grieve the loss of things that were still there but weren't entirely there? And I think that's a good parallel. That's a good way to think about, and a good parallel to grief from the pandemic, because those of us that did survive, what is there to grieve? We were lucky. Like, we were the lucky ones, right?
Yep.
Or we were the fortunate, or we were the, who knows, whatever label you're going to put on yourself for having come out on the other side of that.
Yeah. Survivor's guilt.
Yeah, exactly. But also, and does the survivor have a right to grieve? That's the question, right? Does the survivor have a right to grieve what happened? And the answer has to be yes, of course, because we can't not grieve. It's just part of the human condition. But what exactly are we grieving?
Yeah. And if we deny ourselves grief, what are the long-term implications for that?
Yeah.
So there's surviving the pandemic. Before, during, and after the pandemic, we've seen a lot of job loss. And you talk about survivor's guilt for people who come to work and they didn't get the email that their job is gone.
Right. Yep.
What do those people have to grieve? They're still employed. Well,
yeah.
They're grieving the relationships.
Yep. The loss of their friend that used to be sitting in the cubicle next to them or in the office next to them. And
yeah, they're grieving what they knew because it's now different. They've had that loss. And there may not be much to learn from it, but there's fear then. So it puts them into that, that amygdala state of, how do I protect myself?
Right. And we've been in that, I guess I would call it like the am I next question, both with the illness of the pandemic and our jobs, right? Yeah. Because am I getting COVID next? Could I die from it? And then am I next to have my job eliminated, or be told I have to work from home when I don't want to, or whatever or I have to go, or I have to come back into the office when I don't want to. Yeah, that's a fascinating.
Yeah. What was your next big takeaway favorite thing?
There was a part where she was talking about concerts and you know, like almost like the spiritual feeling that you get. And I had this memory years ago. I saw Prince at the Nutter Center.
Oh yeah.
And I went because a friend bought a ticket and then bought 2 tickets for her and her boyfriend, and then they broke up and she couldn't find somebody else to go with. And I remember watching the audience, and it was like they were at church. I mean, they were worshiping this individual. And I had that thought of like, this is better than church for them. Like, this is better than church. This is a spiritual moment for these individuals watching Prince. And then I also wrote down in my notes Taylor Swift, because I went to the Taylor Swift concert
did you?
I did. I'm not a Swiftie. My daughter has called me a Swiftie in training. So she was constantly like giving me the updates. And the thing that struck me, and again, this is the Paycor Stadium, 65,000 people inside the stadium, 20,000 additional people outside of the stadium. Most of them, me not one of them, and other people I could tell, but most people in there scream singing the lyrics, right? They are screaming. My daughter reminded me, like, remember I used to dance to this song when I was in 1st grade, right? And she's 20 now. So she's grown up with this individual as kind of a model of love, loss, impermanence, grief, right? Like, when I was at that concert, I also had that same thing of like, this is a spiritual moment for these people. This is a spiritual moment in terms of this young woman and her performance and like being a part of it. Yeah. And so I think
Euphoria
and also bittersweet, because it was 3 hours and then it was over.
Yeah.
And for most of us, we're not getting that again. I mean, we might go to another Taylor Swift concert, but we're not getting that moment on July 1st at Paycor Stadium in Cincinnati, Ohio, right? That's not coming back. One of the things that's interesting at the Taylor Swift concert, you know, what you get when you walk in is this bracelet that has an LED light in it. And one of the things that happens throughout the concert is the lights light up. There's a visual realization of everyone in the same space. I mean, besides the fact that you're seeing everyone, you're also seeing, like, when it got dark enough, these flashing LED lights. There's no mistaking that you are part of something freaking huge. And, you know, because we're talking about leadership and leadership development, and I'm apparently a leadership nerd, one of the things that I literally thought multiple times during that concert was, it is very clear when you're watching that concert, the entire show, the entire 3 hours, that it is her vision and these other 12 people or 15 people that are constantly there are there to make her look good. And they do. And she is publicly appreciative of that. Somebody should study Taylor Swift as a CEO, because that is what I saw on the stage, was a really strong leader, that all of these people are here to make her job come to life. And it's evident, as someone who's kind of a leadership nerd, like it's evident that that's what's happening.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, Michelle. I think that is interesting to think of that as a leadership model. We've reached a good stopping point, so I'll leave you here. During the next episode, Michelle challenges me with this question.
I hate to say this, but I think the thing that always challenges me when I read books like this is this self-indulgent.
Until then, I hope you're able to pause and find a little bitter and sweet in your own life.